If this is about rings, then Bill Russell is the greatest player of all time. Like, we want to sort of manipulate the narrative, as the kids like to say. Oh, well, Michael's got to be the greatest because of the way he played. Okay, it's the modern era, and we know Michael's successful on and off the court. Bill Russell did everything you want in a star player. He did everything. He won in college. He won in the Olympics. He won in the pros. He won, 8 straight? He won 11 titles. Okay, so what's the argument? Well, he wasn't as excited. Well, he wasn't polished offensively. Oh, he couldn't play in today's game. So we keep changing the goal line. We move the goal line here. Is it playing ability? Is it resume? And that's where I come back to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. To me, if I look at everything he accomplishes, the greatest player of all time. Okay, greatest basketball player of all time. There's no marketing here. He didn't have, signature shoe. He didn't have any, great nickname. Nothing. Kareem, 3 for 3 in college. He couldn't play his freshman year, or he would have gone 4 for 4. He was most valuable player all 3 years. In winning the championship, player of the year, most outstanding player in the Final Four. Can't do better than that. Nope. Somehow he wasn't the greatest college basketball player. Michael Jordan was. You got 6 titles here. He won 6 MVPs. He was an all-star 19 times. And you forget about how great, yes, all-time leading scorer. He was first team all-defense, I think 5 times. If Kareem was, let's say, 5 or 6 years younger, then maybe we would have seen him in prime time, in his prime, and that would have been a little bit different there. But to me, if you said, I'm going to combine everything here, then the package is Michael Jordan, because that's easy to understand. Oh, we like him. Be like Mike. You go 6 for 6. Okay. If Michael goes 4 and 2, he's not the best basketball player of all time, folks. He will be in the conversation, but he wouldn't be considered the greatest player of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest basketball player of all time. If I can look at high school, college, pros, Kareem is the greatest player of all time. Now you say, oh, he had to have magic. Scotty, if Mike doesn't have Scotty, according to Mike, he doesn't win these titles. So you can't say, oh, Kareem needed help. He had Oscar later in Oscar's career, and they won a title. Look at that Bucks team. Not a great team, but they had Kareem. Lou Alcindor at the time. But we get caught up in the rings, and then all of a sudden we go, well, wait a minute. Robert Horry won 7. Steve Kerr won whatever, 5 or 6. Now, then it gets into a silly argument there. This is about great players, and if you're going to say the bottom line is how many championships, okay. Now, I use that more with a quarterback than I do, other teams, other sports. Like, is Barry Bonds somehow not one of the great players of all time because he didn't win anything? Apparently, if you use that logic there. I just think it's dangerous to do that, to say, Dan Marino never won. We can look at quarterbacks who won Super Bowls. You can't sit here and tell me that Bob Greasy and Bart Starr were better than Dan Marino. Not. Oh, they won Super Bowl. Okay, they won Super Bowls. Michael won 6 rings. He went 6-0. Is he spectacular? Great. Did he do everything you wanted him to do? Need to do? Yes, he did all of those things. But when we start to go, well, Scotty's got twice as many rings as Scotty. All right. Let Scotty play with the Cleveland Cavaliers and tell me how he does. Does he take the team to the finals? Do they come back from 3-1? Even if he goes to Miami, are they winning those titles with Scotty there with Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh? Maybe. I mean, that's the fun part of the argument. But when, it feels like, here's my trump card. He's got more titles than you. Kobe, to me, is equal to Michael Jordan. And I know that's blasphemous to say, but folks, I saw them play, both of them. If I'm just looking at basketball ability, Kobe is equal to Michael. He is. I know we don't want to admit it. Offensively, he is what Michael was. And maybe then some. Michael was a better all-around player because he was a great, great defensive player. But when we come to rings and then it's Bill Russell, yeah, but it can't be Bill Russell. And then all of a sudden you're going, oh, okay, let's take Bill Russell out of the equation because he just played for a great team and a great coach and had a fellow Hall of Famers, and he's not involved in this. No. That's what we were talking about prior to the show. And I still think Kareem, if it's possible to be underrated, is underrated. Even his college years, I didn't get to see many games on TV. We missed everything with Kareem. And yeah, you can point out that Magic stepped in the Sixers series, played center, and ended up being the MVP, and they beat the 76ers. You can make all those arguments. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest basketball player of all time. Michael Jordan is the most celebrated player of all time, and rightfully so. I understand it. We're all about packaging things, your brand, marketing. Jordan is still marketing. He marketed himself. This was his comeback. The fact that you have players who wear his logo is the true testament. Here's LeBron with Michael Jordan's logo on his shoe. I get it. I understand it. And this reinforced the Michael greatness on us who saw it. And he introduced himself to a whole new generation. Brilliant, brilliant marketing. Absolutely. Doug Gottlieb just joined us via Zoom. Doug, can you hear me?
I can. I was in my car, listening as I do every morning, taking my dog for a walk. And that's Odell Beckham Jr. in the background. And I wanted to help you out here. I completely disagree with you on Kareem, and I'll tell you why in a second.
Okay.
But the pettiness of Paul Pierce, and I've known Paul Pierce. We graduated same year of high school. He was my roommate at ABCD. Look, Paul's a prideful guy, and I think the fact that he was a great player in this, and people don't talk about him, I'm sure that doesn't sit well with him. But look, Dan, he's doing nothing different than what Isaiah's done for years. Isaiah and Jordan don't get along. He's downplayed Jordan for years, and he's doing the same. But the biggest mistake that he's making is what a lot of people my age do, talking about guys they never saw play. Look, Bill Russell's a great player. Will Chamberlain's my only knowledge of Will Chamberlain is from my dad, who thought Will Chamberlain was a dog. That every big game he didn't show up in, every single one. So I would just say we should start from the Bird and Magic era and then move forward.
I'm fine with that. But you know what? Paul's an analyst and should be objective here and just say, look, I had a rivalry with LeBron. I didn't get along with him. And then if you want to say, here's my top 5 or my top 7, I'm fine with that. He's an analyst on ESPN.
Look, there's also a possibility he actually believes this. He believes this. The problem is how he supports his argument.
That's true.
That's your point.
That's true.
Which is a really good. Look, my thing about Kareem, and Kareem's the guy who he checks all the boxes. But here's the thing. Give me the moment. Give me just even one moment when he and Magic were on the Lakers where it was Kareem's team. If it wasn't, obviously the most famous moment in Magic's rookie year was what he did on the road against Philadelphia.
Yep.
And when they beat the Boston Celtics, it was Magic making the baby sky hook. And I know that Kareem was past his prime, but when Kareem got to the Lakers, they didn't immediately win. It took them until they got Magic Johnson to win. Magic and Bird took over the league. I think you start there, then you go to Jordan. You got to include Duncan and maybe, and Kobe in some of these modern day discussions. And then I think you have LeBron James and Shaquille O'Neal and some others as well. But look, I get the need. You're a Celtic. You got to mention Bill Russell. But we never saw Bill Russell play, so it's really hard to give context.
Well, Kareem was MVP in '85 in the finals.
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying he's not. No, I'm not sitting here telling you that you're an idiot for saying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest player of all time. You can make an argument. My counter argument to that, Dan, would be But
Doug, I was including college basketball in this. He's the greatest player he's had. If I look at high school, college, and the NBA, he's the greatest player of all time. Greatest career. MVPs, won titles, led the league in scoring, blocks, rebound. He did everything you wanted. I know you. If we said, "Oh, you're going to start your team with Kareem or Michael," I know that you're going to say Michael there,
right.
And I might too. But Kareem did everything, and that's why it was laughable, the ESPN best college basketball player. It's not close. It is Kareem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, listen. Yeah. I mean, look, Bill Russell, didn't they win 60 in a row with Casey Jones at University of San Francisco? Granted, maybe not the overall dominance of Kareem at UCLA. Yeah. I would say, like, if you're going to do college and pro, then you put Bill Russell in there as well. He also did it as a coach, player coach, which is unique.
I don't think Russell was a great player, though. I think he was the ultimate team player. He was so limited offensively, Doug. He was great at what he needed to be great at, and they had they had 8 Hall of Famers on that team at one point, and you had maybe the greatest coach of all time.
Okay, but many of the times in which they beat Wilt Chamberlain, and and Wilt Chamberlain's stats dipped against the Boston Celtics unlike any other time. And when Wilt Chamberlain played, whether it was with the Philadelphia Warriors or when he played with the Lakers, he had Jerry West and Elgin Baylor in his team. And only once when Wilt was far past his. We could go round and round. My thing is I mean, even like Bill Russell's numbers were still crazy. But the game was totally different. There was very limited defense. There was no 3-point shot. And look, I'll take your word for it because you're the only one of the two of us to remember the history of basketball because you're that old, Dan. I'm kidding.
Thank you.
But I think the biggest mistake dudes make is like Paul. Like, look, I love Paul. We grew up in the same area. So he should have an affinity for Magic Johnson. Probably has. I don't know how he feels about Kobe because that was a contemporary. It's really hard to find guys who analyze basketball, who know the history of basketball. Because when you're a kid, you don't have time. If you're a player, you don't really have time to go and analyze. I'm the exception because I'm a coach's son. Most of the great players, they weren't breaking down. They weren't doing what Kobe was doing, breaking down Jordan's moves. They were just out there hooping, trying to get better, playing 4 or 5 games a day. And so the best perspective Paul can give you is, hey, I played against all these guys. Let me tell you, Kobe was better than LeBron, and here's why. That's where he can provide insight that no one else can. Now, it's really hard to disconnect your own personal feelings. I will tell you that there's a good group of former NBA players, some current NBA players are like, look, LeBron played in a terrible East. When he played in Miami, they not only joined the super team, but remember, they kicked out the legs from the Raptors and from the Cavs, and so that took away any sort of competition in the East. Yes, when he was 22, what he did, how they beat Detroit, but we had a lot of weird teams come out of the East. Remember, Allen Iverson came out of the East and was a one-man band. The East was just that far down.
Okay, we'll just settle on this here. Do you think LeBron's a top 5 player of all time?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Doug, it's great to talk to you.
Likewise.
All right, thank you. It's Doug Gottlieb there. I appreciate the back and forth. I always enjoy that. But, all I want to do is stick up for players that people didn't see. That's all. And that's why I bring up certain players. And, people never saw Oscar Robertson play. They didn't. Maybe you saw highlights, but you didn't see his greatness. All we know is he averaged a triple-double, therefore he's one of the top 10 players of all time. Oscar was a great player. Can't argue with that at all. But people didn't see him. If he didn't average a triple-double, people would not put Oscar Robertson in the top 10. And then all of a sudden, Russell Westbrook Jr. III does it on a yearly basis. Is he one of the top 10 players of all time? If he wins a title, he'd be right in there with Oscar Robertson, right? It's just, we have these convenient arguments here. And everybody, I love when people have their own opinions about players. I'm fine with that. I like discussing it. I like learning. I just think Kareem is the best basketball player of all time. Nobody ever roots for the big guy. Yeah, McLevin.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with the big guy versus a guard comparison. You know how we had the idea of a separate salary cap for quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Can there be a separate list for the big men? Because it feels weird. Like, remember with Ewing, no one likes the big man. It feels weird to compare Kareem and Jordan when they're so different.
Well, I agree with Doug. If you start it with the Bird and Magic era and then move forward with that, just call it the TV era. I'm fine with that because then it takes out, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain and, Dolph Schayes and George Mikan and some of these other players, and nobody saw them play. People may have seen Oscar Robertson play with the Bucks. That was not Oscar. Because you're looking at Oscar, he just looks like he's a point guard that's bigger than every other guard. But there was nothing that was dynamic about him. He was a great floor general back then. But he was averaging 26, 27, 28 points, 8 assists a game. But he was playing for a bad franchise, the Cincinnati Royals. Then he went to Milwaukee. Final piece, they win because they bring in Lou Alcindor. And that's when Lou Alcindor answered all the questions. Yeah, Paul.
I wonder, based off that logic, who's going to be the guy today where people say, wait, he must have been the best player in the league? I'm thinking James Harden, because if you look at James Harden's stats the past 5 years, he's by far, stat-wise, the greatest player in the league. Like, his stats are silly. But I don't think anyone is going to say he's the best player in the NBA. A generation from now, when people say, remember those players back then?
Russell Westbrook, to me, will stand out more than James Harden.
Okay.
Because Harden just scores. Now, he has the ball, so he's getting 7 or 8 assists a game. But this is Russell Westbrook's averaging a triple-double. Does that not mean anything anymore? Because it meant a whole lot when we talked about Oscar. No, he averaged triple-double. That's all people knew, averaged triple-double. They know nothing about any of his games in the NBA. Give me a magical game with Oscar Robertson. And I don't mean to single him out. I'm singling out the people that, collectively I'm singling them out, if you can do that, where we're talking about, hey, I just know this about Oscar Robertson. And there's other guys that you need to know about. And I just think sometimes we do that. Bill Russell, and I always hear from Celtic fans, what do you have against Bill Russell? Nothing. He was just from a different era. And if we're going to have titles, and that's the bottom line, then call him the greatest player of all time. Just be consistent, because Michael is the greatest player of all time. Bill Russell never lost a finals. Right? Not that I'm aware of. He had 11 titles. Is he the greatest player of all time? Well, that's what we're using, as the bottom line for Michael Jordan. Hey, never lost. Okay, never lost.